Incredible moment. Homeless man discovers billionaire's daughter alive at funeral. What happened next shook everyone. Tom stood outside St. Mary's, the grand church's steps polished and uncompromising against the asphalt. Wealthy mourners huddled in clusters, their laughter and whispered conversations swirling like a gust of wind. He brushed the frayed edges of his jacket, the fabric a testament to nights spent on vacant benches, and felt the sharp pang in his gut. The echo of forgotten dreams filled his ears, calling him towards the sanctuary where Sarah, his childhood friend, was supposed to be long lost. He hesitated. Why was he here? Questions flooded his mind, urging him to turn back and hide among the shadows where he belonged. Yet, here stood the memory of a girl who had climbed trees with him, ignoring the world's expectations. And now all he had left were those moments. They once changed the future together, but now he was nobody. The despair was heavy as he climbed the steps to the ornate doors, heart racing with an unusual blend of excitement and dread. As Tom crossed the threshold and the church enveloped him in a solemn embrace, he felt the weight of his worn glasses and unwashed skin, a stark contrast to the designer suits that filled the pews. His pulse raced with each respectful murmur of grief. Absolutely uninvited, absolutely unwelcome. What's worse? This funeral was for a man whose abundance of wealth had outstretched his grasp on humanity, while Tom barely scraped by with loose change and hot soup. Before he could retreat, though, he caught an undeniable sight. Sarah, clad in deep black, holding her head high amidst a sea of sorrowful faces. Confusion crashed over him like a wave. She was meant to be a distant memory. This Sarah, once vibrant with laughter and dreams, now mourned a billionaire father? But then again, maybe that was the heartbreak of it. All their lives had taken such divergent paths. How was she here, living, breathing? An internal battle tore through him with every furtive glance. Approaching her would mean challenging the very assumptions that society had cloaked around him. He wanted to scream her name, but his voice felt stifled in the choking air. Instead, he felt torn like the very shirt he wore. What was the point? Could a wisp of recognition bridge the chasm built over years? Doubt gripped him as whispers began to reverberate through the rows of seats. Look at that man. Who does he think he is? He could feel their cold stares scraping against him. And then Sarah's eyes caught his. A flicker of surprise shattered the stillness. Did she recognize him? In that moment, motivation ignited something deeper within him. He wouldn't let the disdain of others shrink him further. Sarah, it's me, Tom. His voice trembled, carrying through the pall of silence, electrifying the congregation. Fear mingled with determination, and as the crowd turned with astonished glares, his childhood friend's expression shifted into one of disbelief. What had he done? He felt muscles tense with the weight of their shocked scrutiny. The essence of their past haunted them now. Tom's heart wrenched as he stood exposed in his ragged clothes, while Sarah showed a heartbeat of recognition from a lifetime ago. But looming fears clawed at his chest. Would she see him as he was now forgotten? Or would the ashes of their shared past inspire something to kindle anew? What was he thinking? The scornful glares sharpened, but their whispers melted into the background as he searched Sarah's face for a love that was faded yet resilient, a reminder of who he used to be. This far into the maelstrom, would they even have a chance to confront their divided realities? The gaze of the mourners closed in tighter, a deliberate prison. But before Tom could reach back into the warmth, a harsh chill swept over him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The tension hung heavy as Tom met Sarah's gaze again. A tempest of hope juxtaposed with fear spiraling within him. Would she acknowledge the past, Or would the barriers of their contrasting lives threaten to silence them both forever? The seconds stretched like the thin fabric of Tom's shirt, tension coiling in the air as the church fell into an uneasy silence. His heart raced, every beat puncturing the thick atmosphere as he waited for Sarah to process his sudden reappearance. He could see the gears turning in her mind while the funeral's somber backdrop faded into nothingness. "Tom, is that really you?" The astonishment in her voice was a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters, a beckoning warmth amid the lingering chill of his self-doubt. The audience's murmurs around them subsided, letting the moment breathe and the weight of history sink in. "Yes, it's me." Tom felt a rush of relief and disbelief wash over him, a fragile buoy in the tumult. There she was, beautiful, unchanged in essence, standing above the sea of those who looked down upon him. But he couldn't shake the urge to shrink back. What did she see now? A figure poor in both possessions and status, or the boy who had once shared her laughter, with the pain of hopelessness and the aspiration of possibility battling for control? He swallowed hard, trying to maintain composure. Words stumbled in his throat like bricks over a ravine, but he pressed on, fighting through the rising tide of vulnerability. "I didn't know. I thought you were gone forever." The flicker of sadness in her eyes felt like an echo from their shared past, a reminder of simple childhood promises now fractured by reality. But that wasn't what lingered most in Tom's mind. It was the realization that meeting between them might bring more than just nostalgia. It could ignite new aspirations. "You've changed," she said softly, glancing down briefly at his worn clothes. Tom braced himself for the judgment, but instead of recoiling, she leaned closer, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "I've thought about you, about how things change for us. I wasn't sure if you even remembered." The world narrowed down to just the two of them at that moment, the whispers of the mourners fading away. Yet the magnitude of Sarah's statement hung heavily between them. Did she remember their childhood dreams? Did she remember their promise to reach for what seemed impossible? "Of course I do. I remember us climbing those trees, dreaming big," he replied, trying to infuse strength into his voice, recalling the purity of their friendship. "I've just been lost." He hesitated, suddenly aware of the gulf that spread between their lives. "I never meant to disappear." "Lost? Or did you choose to?" The question wasn't accusatory, but probing, like she was trying to dissect the layers of his regret. He felt laid bare, vulnerable to her scrutiny. In that moment, he recognized the truth. He had chosen to withdraw, to let circumstances define him. "I didn't think I had a choice," he countered, anger flaring in his chest. But it wasn't truly directed at her. It was a revelation. He'd given his power away, letting the demands of survival dictate his path. They had grown up in the same streets, shared the same laughter. Yet somehow, they had morphed into disparate realities, hers gilded with privilege, his steeped in familiarity with despair. "Tom, you can change things," she encouraged, her eyes alight with a fire he hadn't seen in years. "You still can." He marveled at how her belief sparked a flicker of hope within him. The moment pressed against his chest like a weight yet to be calculated. This was an opportunity for something different, a chance to step away from the shadows he had resigned himself to. "I don't know how," he admitted, fear creeping into his thoughts again. "What can I do? I'm not." "Stop right there. You're not just anything. You're Tom, and I want to help you." Her words mingled with resolve and compassion, transforming the vulnerability of their encounter into something that felt like it could change everything. As their conversation dug deeper and the fear gave way to emboldened resolve, Tom sensed a new direction forming for him. He recognized the potential for growth, personal and professional. It became clear that this moment, rife with old dreams, was about to intertwine with a new narrative, but that spark of determination came with a caveat. He could feel the weight of the audience's judgment still pressing on his shoulders, eager for the inevitable lapse back to self-doubt. Would he allow himself to be transformed by this encounter, or would he retreat back into the familiar shadows he learned to navigate? In the shifting dynamics of their reunion, A delicate choice loomed before him. Tom took a deep breath, fully aware of the road ahead. Let us not just reunite. Let us change things, he proposed, a surge of bravery coursing through him. I can't do this alone. And together, they stood at the threshold of possibility, ready to confront the echoes of their past while forging paths anew. As the gathering resumed their murmurings, Tom realized that the hardest part was yet to come. The time had arrived to fully embrace the choices that would define him. Would he have the courage to confront not just the whispers of the crowd, but the reflection of the man he truly wanted to become? Tom felt the hum of anticipation linger in the air as he and Sarah left the muted confines of the church behind. Beneath the oppressive weight of his self-doubt, a flicker of hope ignited within him, altered by her unwavering belief in his potential. Maybe this baptism by fire at the funeral was the jolt he needed to reassess his life. They stepped into the cool, crisp air, the brightness of the day starkly contrasting the darkness he had become so accustomed to. A soothing breeze whispered through the trees, but his heart raced with a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. "What now?" he asked, forcing the question out, though part of him feared the answer. "Now we look at what comes next. You can think about what you really want," Sarah replied, her gaze steady. The clarity in her eyes mirrored the urgency growing within him, a need to shift from passive acceptance of his circumstances to active participation in his own life. Tom nodded slowly, thoughts churning. What did he want? It had been so long since he had allowed himself such a question. He thought of the dreams he had abandoned, the aspirations that felt so foreign, buried beneath layers of regret and hardship. "I want to start fresh, maybe even pursue something I really care about," he said, the words tumbling out, accompanied by a rush of newfound determination. "Then let us make a plan," she suggested, her enthusiasm contagious. "You have skills, what are they? We can build something from them." Hearing her speak felt like a hand outstretched in a treacherous abyss. He hesitated, insecurity whispering in his ear. His experience had never catered to conventional skills. Survival had been his only teaching ground. And what did that matter in this moment? "I've worked odd jobs, manual labor, a little carpentry here and there." The weight of his response hung in the air, heavy with realization. Yes, he possessed merit. But was it enough? "Tom, that is more than most people can say. You have hands that can create," she encouraged, her voice cutting through his doubts. "What about education? Do you want to pursue something formally?" He shook his head, the mere thought of going back to school stinging with the salt of past failures. "I don't think I'm suited for that. Besides, how will I pay for it?" But even as he spoke, the flicker of his former ambitions danced in his mind. He had once dreamed of becoming an architect, seeing the world through structural elegance and design, transforming environments. Then let us explore community programs. There are scholarships and opportunities for those willing to take the leap. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Her eyes sparkled with excitement that ignited his inner spark, prickling with possibility as if he were rediscovering a part of himself believed long lost. "I can attend workshops, build a portfolio," he murmured, a slow smile creeping across his face. It was warmer than any sunshine he had felt in years, the idea of creating his own path shimmering before him. The entire idea seemed feasible, tangible even. For the first time in a long while, Tom felt the heavy fog of hopelessness begin to lift. "So what is holding you back?" she asked gently, her question a mere echo of the self-reflection brewing within him. With each second ticking by, he could feel the weight of unresolved fears stewing beneath the excitement. "I'm terrified," he finally admitted, his breath shaky. "What if I fail again? What if the world still sees me as that guy, the one who disappeared? Because of the past? That doesn't have to define you, Tom. You have the power to redefine who you are." Her encouragement swirled around him, gilded with sincerity. The truth rang clear. The barriers he had erected were mental constructs born of years of solitude and shame. Yet, she was right, he could choose to step outside those confines. Maybe the thought hung in the air, a question poised on the precipice of transformation. "Then let us make it happen. one step at a time. Raising her hand, she motioned forward as if inviting him to follow. Tom took a breath, feeling hope bloom anew, and he moved beside her, ready to advance toward a horizon laden with untapped potential. This was his challenge: to take control, carve out a niche, and shake off the constraints of a past he was done with. Yet, deep down, he understood this journey would not be without turmoil. The shadows of his history were not mere illusions, they were real, powerful, and they could easily pull him back at the first sign of struggle. As they began to map out a tentative plan over coffee, his thoughts flipped back, seeking to hold onto the sense of excitement. But lurking beneath it all, a daunting fear brewed. Would he summon the willpower to chase this new life, or let self-doubt drown the flames of possibility once again? The journey towards self-discovery had only just begun, and with it came an overwhelming realization. Growth was fraught with uncertainty. Would he muster the courage when faced with the daunting landscapes of change ahead? The coffee shop buzzed with life, the hiss of the espresso machine mingling with the murmur of conversations. Tom sat across from Sarah, absorbing the heat radiating from the cup nestled in his hands. It was a grounding sensation, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cool uncertainty swirling within him. "Workshops for architecture, you said?" he prompted, feeling his heart race again. Just thinking about it ignited a desire that had lain dormant, aching to be explored. The thrill of creating, of designing spaces, played like a distant melody in his mind, something he had almost forgotten how to hum. Absolutely. There are local initiatives that focus on aspiring architects. You'd be amazed at the resources available to you, she replied, her eagerness reflected in the way she leaned forward. The promise of collaboration had begun to dawn on them, transforming ideas into possibilities. As they outlined the first steps, a realization struck him. This ambition wouldn't simply be about design. It would require diving into relationships, facing mentors and peers alike with bravery. Remarkably, that frightened him even more than the thought of failure. "I don't know if I can do it," he murmured, the weight of those words almost suffocating. "What if I'm not good enough? What if they see right through me? And what if they see potential?" Sarah countered, her eyes sharp yet kind. "You'll never know unless you take that leap, Tom. You can't let fear drown your talent." Her response surfed through his internal storm, buoying him momentarily while simultaneously fueling the rising tide of apprehension. But with each minute spent in her presence, a shield of conviction began to form around him. Could he genuinely believe in his potential? He found himself thinking of the past as life before the hiatus, each detour a page marked with mistakes and regret. Yet, somewhere amidst the remnants of his history, the flicker of unspent dreams persisted, begging to be acknowledged. "Okay, what is step one?" he asked, voice steadying with resolve as he ripped the Band-Aid off, scrambling above his anxieties. Sarah smiled, a glimmer of triumph in her eyes as she began to flesh out the stratagem. "First, you want to gather your portfolio materials. Show what you've done, the carpentry work, any project you've crafted, even sketches. Start building a narrative of who you are as a creator," she explained, the words flowing effortlessly. As the conversation deepened, Tom's mind began weaving all the strands of his experience into a tangible form. He hadn't thought of all those afternoons tinkering away with wood, fashioning small pieces, and breathing life into his creations. Those experiences weren't merely shadows of his past. They held the seeds of his future. The thought invigorated him, fueling a restlessness that urged him into action. "I could organize my work, perhaps even design some small projects, different ideas. Capture my life through this art," he brainstormed, newfound excitement flaring up in his chest. "You got this," Sarah cheered, encouraging him like he was putting together the pieces of some magnificent puzzle. But doubt still lurked on the periphery, whispering taunts. Would anyone care? Did he have the right to aspire after all this time? "Actually, I'm worried I might just make a fool of myself," he admitted, the words slipping out almost against his will. The impending vulnerability was frightening. Remember, it's about growth. We're all learning constantly, And that's your power embracing the discomfort to evolve, she replied thoughtfully. Her unwavering belief in his capacity was a lifeline, yet self-doubt grappled fiercely for supremacy. After a long pause filled with contemplation, he turned to her, fervor gleaming in his eyes. I need to check out those workshops. Maybe just visiting would be a start? A modest step, but it felt reasonable, like baby steps leading to solid ground. Yes, let us make it a goal, she clapped enthusiastically. The prospect of taking actionable steps unfolded before him, each one a stitch in the frayed fabric of his identity, weaving it into something more vibrant. But as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a dissonance threaded through his anticipation. What if all this was fleeting? What if he dove and only to find he was, indeed, still that guy who had once hidden away? The echoes of his past haunted him still, a specter ready to rematerialize at any moment. Tom wrestled with that anxiety as the two set plans in motion, but a flicker of determination mixed with dread swirled inside him. It was a palpable reminder that change demanded grit and vulnerability, and perhaps, just perhaps, he had the capacity to confront this unknown frontier. What awaited him there could be remarkable, but the moment also loomed ominously ahead. Was he prepared to face what he feared most? The lingering shadows of his former life stirred restlessly, whispering temptations to remain static, to retreat. The risk of failure was real, but equally, so was the risk of not trying at all. As they finished their coffees, Tom straightened, ready to dare against the current that had dragged him down for too long. But as his thoughts coalesced around his next steps, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if those who had known him before were waiting for him to slip, to reinforce the very narrative he wanted to escape? Would they attack the burgeoning confidence with the memories of his past? That darkness loomed, not just from his own doubts, but from outside forces, and the stage was set for confrontation. How far would he go to break free? Would he be ready when those inevitable shadows returned to claim him? The following morning brought a crispness to the air, a fresh canvas waiting to be painted by Tom's emerging resolve. He stood in front of the mirror, scrutinizing his reflection. He was still the man who had concealed himself beneath layers of introspection and self-doubt. Yet something had shifted in him overnight. The anticipation of exploring the workshops filled the void of unease with a flicker of hope. He brushed his hair back and adjusted his collar. A simple act meant to symbolize more than just tidiness. It was a declaration of intent. He made his way to the workshop's address. His thoughts spun like a whirlpool, a mix of excitement and apprehension. What if the other participants were scathing critics? Would they spot the chinks in his armor? Or worse, the inadequacies he had long grappled with? Each step felt heavy, the weight of potential judgment pressing down on him. But he reminded himself of Sarah's words, the power of growth, of evolution through discomfort. Upon arriving, a vibrant group stood under a large canvas tent, their energy palpable. Some were absorbed in sketches, while others shared animated discussions, tracing designs in the air with their hands. Tom's heart raced. This was his arena, yet he felt like an intruder in a world he had nearly abandoned. The gnawing fear of failure clawed at him. He approached a table displaying portfolios, hesitant fingers brushing over the edges of someone's detailed drawings. Each image sparked a sense of inadequacy mixed with inspiration. He couldn't help but feel that every stroke of pencil on paper encapsulated dreams he had almost forgotten. Just as he began to retreat into himself, a voice broke through the haze. "Hey there, you knew." A tall woman with an open smile stepped up beside him, her enthusiasm infectious. "I'm Lila. We're just diving into our projects. What is your background?" Tom paused, suddenly acutely aware of the swirl of expectations surrounding him. It was a simple question, but it stopped him cold. I've done some carpentry and small designs, but nothing too serious." Her interest piqued. Lila shifted closer. "That's awesome. Carpentry is such a vital skill. You have a unique perspective to bring to the table." For the first time in a long while, Tom felt a faint flicker of validation. Maybe he was starting from scratch after all, Perhaps he had a foundation to build on. As introductions flowed around him, he soaked in their stories, each about failures, breakthroughs, and the challenges of their creative journeys, all laced with a touch of vulnerability. It was liberating, the realization that they, too, bore burdens. With each word exchanged, the paralyzing self-doubt that had held him captive began to erode. Lila's positivity rooted itself in his mind. He felt emboldened to share some of his own projects, reaching for the sketches he'd tucked away. "So, I've been working on some designs that reflect nature," he offered, his voice steadier than before. With newfound courage, he revealed a tattered sketch of a sustainable cabin design, infused with an authenticity that felt like an extension of himself. Lila's enthusiasm reignited his spark, her feedback thoughtful. "This is fantastic, Tom. You have a sense of harmony here, a real knack for integrating your vision with the environment. You should explore these ideas further." Bolstered by her reaction, Tom began to engage more. He set a goal: to contribute to the collaborative project they were embarking on at the workshop. It wouldn't just be about expressing himself creatively. It would be about confronting the insecurities that had held him back for too long. But lurking in the back of his mind were the shadows of his past life, the echoes of mockery and skepticism from those who doubted him. Would he ever fully escape the weight of their opinions? And what if he faced a situation similar to the ones he had endured before, where failure translated into criticism and shame? As lunch approached, Tom sensed the shift within himself, an urge to hold onto this momentum, to venture deeper into the heart of his aspirations. Yet a nagging fear still hovered. What if he couldn't sustain this newfound determination when faced with real stakes? The day shifted as he prepared to present his sketches to the group later, a meeting point of vulnerability and ambition. A confrontation was unfolding, the stakes rising. Could he reveal his heart's truest work and withstand the critical gaze of peers who didn't know the tortured roads he had traveled? The day's cadence thrummed with possibility, but the question remained: what if confronting his creativity meant exposing himself to the harsh reality of his past? As lunch wrapped up, anticipation crackled in the air. The moment of insight waited just beyond his reach. Would he become the architect of his life, or let the ghosts of his past dictate the blueprints of his future? As the clock ticked closer to the presentation, Tom felt the adrenaline dance in his veins, a cocktail of excitement and trepidation. He sat at his table, hands gripping the edges so tightly his knuckles turned white. Around him, laughter and spirited discussions filled the air, but Tom could only focus inward, where a tempest brewed. Would vulnerability invite critique, or would it forge connection? He closed his eyes briefly, inhaling deeply. The scent of paint mixed with the faint remnants of lunch distilled the noise, and the world slipped away momentarily. What had Lila said? It lingered in his mind like sweet incense, the idea of harmony. In that fleeting moment of clarity, he realized what he needed to share was not just the finished project he had imagined, but the raw essence of his journey, the struggles, the setbacks, the moments when inspiration had seemed a distant shore. He wouldn't just show the designs. He would unveil pieces of himself. When the time came, Tom stood at the front of the group, clutching his sketches like a shield of armor, lines blurring as his palms would occasionally tremble. The sight of eager faces greeted him, kindling a hesitant spark of bravery. His heart throttled against his chest as he met Lila's encouraging gaze, a silent nod prompting him forward. Hi everyone, he started, voice wavering slightly. "I'm Tom. I know I'm relatively new here, but I wanted to share something I've been working on that integrates what I love about nature with my designs." As he spread his sketches across the table, a wave of self-doubt surged within. Each line reflected a part of his past, fragments of experiences that had molded him. He began to speak, the words rushing out, compelled by a newly found courage. "I've always found peace in the woods, in the symmetry of trees, and the stillness of water." This he pointed to a detailed drawing of a cabin surrounded by tall evergreens. "Is my attempt to blend into that landscape rather than dominate it. I think it's important that our spaces tell stories, harmonize with their surroundings rather than impose upon them. The room absorbed his words. He allowed himself to delve deeper, peeling back the layers of his insecurities. He spoke about his trials, the years he had spent feeling lost, and how every scrap design had fueled his longing to create something dreamlike. The skepticism of the past echoed in his mind, yet he pushed through, determined to embrace the moment. Tentative applause followed his presentation, but Tom remained acutely aware of a silence that loomed. He had exposed his vulnerabilities to a budding community of which he was still an outsider. Would they recognize the sincerity behind his designs, or would they dismiss him as pretentious? He searched the room, landing on Lila's approving smile, which steadied something in his gut. "Acknowledge your truth," a small voice echoed within him. Then, the unexpected happened. A former participant, a man with graying hair and artfully worn hands, raised a finger, catching his attention. "Your concepts are solid," he said, his tone measured. "But the realism of your vision, how do you plan to evolve that? It's crucial to consider the practicality alongside passion." Tom felt a rush of indignation. The man was correct, but his words struck a chord of defensiveness. "I intend to work closely within communities to blend practicality with artistry," he replied, driven by a determination to reclaim his narrative. "That's commendable," the man replied, a hint of a smile crossing his features. "Art isn't just about vision, it's a dialogue. You must connect with the real-world implications." The conversation shifted to a constructive dialogue, punctuating the previously tense atmosphere. Ideas volleyed back and forth, and Tom began to envision a collaborative approach, inviting feedback, iterating, adapting. As the session concluded, Tom felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. The shadows of his past had dimmed, replaced by the budding confidence born from his willingness to share not only his designs but the very essence that fueled them. This was a leap into unknown territory where creativity and vulnerability intertwined. Yet, as he exited the workshop that day, buoyed by new friendships and a sense of purpose, unease crept back in. What would tomorrow hold? Would the day's courage hold firm against the inevitable critiques that awaited? Battling anticipation, he left knowing his journey had only just begun, the blueprint of his future still to be forged anew. But one question echoed relentlessly. Was he ready to face the real test, turning those abstract designs into tangible realities that could stand the scrutiny of the world? The following day loomed before Tom like an uncharted territory. As dawn broke, the golden hue filtering through the blinds felt almost mocking. He stretched out in bed, lingering over the possibilities of the day ahead. His heart raced at the thought of what lay on his to-do list. Meetings with contractors, visits to potential project sites, and most daunting of all, aligning his designs with the demands of reality. Tom dressed carefully, each piece of clothing a statement of intent. He hoped that a polished exterior would reflect the inner work he had begun. But as he walked through the door, the uncertainties of his skills tugged at him like gravity. Could his designs withstand real-world pressures? What if the idealism he believed in crumbled under scrutiny? He tapped the steering wheel in rhythm with the thoughts tumbling in his mind. The workshop from the previous day buzzed warmly in his memory, but he could still hear that man's question echoing. How do you plan to evolve that? There was an urgency to his response, a need to not just survive this scrutiny, but to thrive in the face of it. Arriving at the office, he was greeted by the buzz of activity. Colleagues were engaged in animated discussions, some hunched over blueprints, others running through material samples. He identified with the anxiety behind each familiar face. They all shared the same struggle, to create something meaningful that transcended mere aesthetics. Tom took a deep breath and approached Lila, who stood by the coffee machine, her laptop open on the table beside her. She was analyzing material options for an upcoming project, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Morning, Tom. How did you feel about yesterday?" she asked, her tone vibrant and inviting. He hesitated, searching for the right words, both excited and terrified. "I was thinking about feedback. The part about merging creativity with practicality. It's daunting. Lila caught his gaze and nodded knowingly. That's the reality check many artists face after a burst of inspiration. It's easy to dream big, but it's the execution that separates the good from the great. Her words hit hard. She was right. It was time to shift from vision to action. I want to reach out to some local builders to gather their input on my designs, understand their insights better. He found himself saying, "Great idea," she replied. Collaborating early on will not only refine your concepts, but also build trust. Just remember, it's a two-way street. You have something valuable to offer, too. Tom felt a wave of resolve wash over him. "I'll do it," he declared, and in that moment, he made a silent vow to himself. This was the beginning of a new chapter. His designs would bridge the gap between idealism and reality. As the day unfolded, he found himself reaching out, calling a few local builders and arranging meetings. One by one, they agreed. Each affirmative response felt like a stamp of approval, bolstering his confidence. Yet lingering doubts kept creeping back. Would he be able to articulate his vision clearly? What if they couldn't see the beauty he perceived? Later, as he stood in his temporary workspace surrounded by sketches, he reviewed his designs over and over, contemplating how to articulate the harmony he sought. The thoughts flowed chaotically, an intricate dance of inspiration and fear. Would the builders truly appreciate the stories his designs aimed to tell, or would they dissect them into mere structures? In an effort to ground himself, Tom devised a plan. He would bring his sketches to their meetings, but he would also prepare a narrative. Each design would be accompanied by stories from his own life, anecdotes that underscored the spirit behind his creations. It was a risk, but he realized that confronting potential rejection head-on was essential for growth. In his heart, a fire ignited. This journey was about more than colors and lines. It encapsulated his struggle for authenticity. He was ready to face the builders, knowing their feedback could forge the reality he envisioned. But with determination also came the nagging question. How would he respond if they rejected not only his designs, but the essence of who he was? The anxiety prickled at the back of his mind. As he prepared for the meetings, Tom knew that this risk might present the ultimate test of his resolve. This was not merely pitching a design. It was an unveiling of himself and his journey. Would the bridge he built withstand the weight of their expectations, or would it collapse under pressure? Tom arrived at the first site visit feeling uncharacteristically buoyant. The morning light bathed the construction zone, the fresh concrete and skeletal frames igniting a flicker of excitement within him. Yet, beneath the surface, anxiety simmered. He checked his watch a few minutes early, but he was determined to project confidence. Walking towards the meeting point, he rehearsed his pitch silently, wanting to articulate the heart of his designs without drowning in excessive detail. What if this was the moment when everything began, or the moment it all fell apart? He exhaled, reminding himself of Lila's words. It was a two-way street. He was here to learn, not just to present. When the builders arrived, Tom was introduced to Marco and Jenna, veteran contractors who had seen countless designs come and go. Their reputation preceded them, their skepticism palpable. Tom started by discussing his designs, infusing them with the personal anecdotes he had meticulously crafted to give life to his work. But halfway through his presentation, he faltered. Jenna's eyebrow raised in that subtle way that conveyed doubt, and Marco's arms crossed over his chest. They were listening, but Tom felt as if the walls closing in. "Look, Tom," Jenna started, choosing her words thoughtfully. "These sketches are ambitious, and they tell a story. But out here, we have to deal with the practicalities. Can they withstand weather conditions? Pricing? Timeline?" Tom's heart sank. Had he overextended his vision? The creative side fought with the pragmatic aspects, a fierce tug-of-war inside him. "I believe they can be adapted. They're designed for flexibility," he responded, but conviction wobbled in his voice. Had the essence of his work been lost in translation? Marco jumped in. "You need to understand what's realistic. A designer-S world is different from a builder-S. You'll have to meet somewhere in the middle. Hearing their feedback was like stumbling through quicksand. He wanted to fight for his vision, but was acutely aware of the necessity of their expertise. Would compromising mean sacrificing the core of what he wanted to express? Each second that passed pressed heavily on his spirit. Perhaps this was the confrontation he had underestimated. Rather than retreat, though, something in him began to shift. Tom took a breath, reclaiming his determination. What if we looked at these designs with your experience in mind? I want to know what could compromise the vision while still creating something that functions beautifully. The shift was immediate. A sense of collaboration replaced the earlier tension. A dialogue emerged as Tom began asking specific questions about where structural constraints would lend themselves to innovative solutions. He found himself leaning into that vulnerability, sharing where he had faltered, inviting their input not just on structure, but on the emotional architecture of the designs. Could they fuse practicality with creativity? By the end of the meeting, Tom felt lighter. While not every idea remained untouched, he appreciated the collaborative effort that was growth. The feedback he had dreaded became a tool for refining his vision. He walked away with a commitment from the builders to work together on developing a prototype, a milestone in his journey. As Tom left, a peculiar warmth suffused his chest, a sensation he hadn't expected to feel after such a serious encounter. He began to realize that his authenticity was not merely about defending his designs, but also about inviting dialogue, being courageous enough to pivot when necessary. In the days that followed, Tom immersed himself in research, honing in on materials and techniques that would blend his artistic vision with the realities of construction. Each morning brought renewed energy as he sought knowledge with vigor, eagerly anticipating the next collaboration. But as the excitement surged, a nagging doubt crept in again. Was he ready for the intense scrutiny of the next meeting? Would the builders embrace the essence behind his latest designs, or would he find himself lost once more in a landscape strewn with challenges? The thought lingered like an ominous cloud. His next meeting was scheduled with the builders and potential investors. The stakes were higher, the expectations steeper. Tom knew that facing this new challenge head-on would not just test his designs, but redefine his identity as a creator. With an electrifying mix of fear and exhilaration, he steeled himself for what was to come. Success or humiliation awaited just around the corner. The day of the meeting dawned with a heaviness in the air, an impending sense of confrontation threading through Tom's psyche. Birds chirped outside his window, the sun harshly bright, yet all he could feel was the tightening knot in his stomach. Tom poured himself a coffee, its warmth doing little to assuage his growing anxiety. He dressed carefully, wanting to reflect the weight and worth of his designs, but every flick of his reflection betrayed him with uncertainty. As he arrived at the construction site, the energy buzzed with activity. Workers hustled about, machines roared, and the temporary walls echoed the sounds of building dreams that tempered his excitement with fear. He touched the damp soil underfoot, taking it as a grounding reminder of the practical essence of his work. This was real. This was happening. Marco and Jenna were already there, discussing plans with a couple of investors, their body language exuding authority. The contrast with Tom felt stark. He stood, clutching his portfolio like a lifeline. This meeting was different. It was no longer just about him and the builders. Now, potential investors were part of the equation, raising the stakes exponentially. "Tom, glad you could make it," Marco called, gesturing him over. Tension crackled between them as he approached. Steeling his resolve, Tom reminded himself of the collaborative spirit he had embraced in the previous meeting. Still, as he drew nearer, doubt whispered insidiously in his ear. Would they still see the potential in his ideas? "Let us get started, shall we?" Jenna's tone was direct, and for a moment, Tom felt smaller under her watchful gaze. He presented his refined designs, brimming with careful adaptations from their last discussion. He weaved an emotional architecture behind his choices, how spaces could evoke feelings, tell stories. Yet there was silence. The investors leaned back, expressionless, while Marco and Jenna exchanged sidelong glances. Uncertainty began to bubble beneath his confidence like a pot on the edge of boiling over. "Tom," Marco finally said, breaking the quiet, "these designs are certainly artistic, but this isn't just about aesthetics. Can you justify the costs here? How do we sell this vision to those potentially funding the project?" Tom's heart sank again. The pragmatic aspect he had previously resisted now loomed large, heavy, and insurmountable. How could he justify creativity in a budgetary landscape that often valued the practical over the inspirational? In a heartbeat, the meeting shifted from a collaborative discourse to a battle. Yet, just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a fleeting image of Lila popped into his mind, her unwavering belief that architecture should stir the soul. "It must speak," she had said. In that moment, he understood that if he was to steer this ship, he had to navigate the choppy waters between pragmatism and vision. "I believe that investing in this design will lead to innovation that takes us beyond conventional boundaries," he asserted, finding his voice. "Yes, the costs are higher up front, but the long-term benefits, higher engagement, increased foot traffic, the essence of community are worth it. These spaces are not just buildings. They are experiences." The room fell quiet again, but this time Tom could sense a shift. He saw Marco and Jenna leaning forward, intrigued rather than skeptical. Their expressions softened, landing somewhere between interest and contemplation. "Interesting," Jenna finally said, tracing the outline of Tom's designs with her finger. "What if we blended some of the core aesthetics with more commonly accepted structures? Could you rework some angles to ease costs without losing your vision?" Tom felt a surge of hope. He could compromise, but not at the cost of the essence he wished to portray. "Absolutely," he replied, exhilaration thrusting him forward. "We can explore that." As an invigorating dialogue unfolded, Tom found himself not just defending his vision, but engaging in a genuine exploration of creative solutions with the investors. Every twist of the conversation became another stride into redefining himself. He was no longer merely a designer, but a collaborator weaving together disparate elements into a cohesive whole. Yet, as they approached a consensus, a familiar thread of doubt wove through him. Had he oversold his vision? Would compromising ultimately strip away the soul he aimed to convey? Too many questions loomed. Success was no longer just within reach. It felt almost tantalizing, just out of grasp. The words of Marco resonated in those moments, framing the future he faced. "This is just the beginning, Tom. We need you to lead this narrative. Can you do that?" The question hung and drifted, a challenge echoing in his mind. Was he prepared to lead, or would fear pull him back into the shadows? As silence enveloped the room, he knew the answers awaited not only in his designs, but in the choices he would make moving forward. With an electric pulse of determination, he realized this moment was not merely about a project. It was about who he would become. The path ahead shimmered with uncertainty, but it was a path he was finally ready to traverse. As he left the meeting, the intensity of the day clung to him. Something crucial was shifting within. He could sense it, but answers remained hazy. What would the next meeting reveal about his ability to navigate this intricate balance of dreams and realities? Would he rise to the challenge or fall into old patterns of doubt? The tension coiled tightly, marking the next chapter of his journey, poised to unfold. Tom stood at the foot of a giant building under construction, the afternoon sun casting a golden hue over the concrete framework. It wasn't just steel and glass rising before him. It was the embodiment of everything he had fought for. Today marked the unveiling of his prototype project, an architectural realization that fused his dreams with practical application. Beyond the blueprints lay the heart of his vision, and at this moment, a palpable blend of excitement and trepidation washed over him. Weeks blurred into months since that initial encounter with Sarah at the funeral, and Tom had transformed more than just his career. He had remade himself from the shadows of despair into a conduit of creativity. The workshops had sparked the fire within him, and he had diligently worked with builders, addressing every piece of feedback to sculpt an authentic architectural narrative. Collaboration became the cornerstone of his development, and each input refined his designs, forging connections he had once thought impossible. Today, he wasn't just presenting sketches. He was articulating a vision. He took a deep breath, feeling the sturdy fabric of his suit, a far cry from the frayed edges he once wore with shame. Confidence surged through him. He was no longer the forgotten boy, but a recognized architect with ideas worth sharing. The innovations he had built would not only beautify spaces, but also tell stories, create community links, and engage the senses in ways once dismissed as lofty ideals. Inside the conference room, potential investors gathered, their expressions shifting between skepticism and curiosity. Marco, Jenna, and Lila flanked him, each embodying the spirit of collaboration he had embraced. As he set his designs on the table, he didn't just pitch ideas. He narrated his journey, infusing his presentation with the lessons learned through vulnerability and teamwork. This project, he began, his voice steady, is a testament to resilience and collaboration. It blends sustainable design with the cultural heartbeat of our community. Each structure is a dialogue between nature and humanity. The room absorbed his words, the investors shifting in their seats. Intrigued, as Tom explained the innovative features, the open spaces that encouraged socializing, the flora incorporated into urban design, and the sustainable materials that honored the earth. He could see the glimmers of interest igniting around the table. Questions emerged, and instead of bracing for judgment, he welcomed them, finding strength in his responses. "How do you envision this enhancing community engagement?" asked an investor, his brow furrowed in thought. "By creating inviting environments, we foster connectivity," Tom replied, excitement bubbling within him. "Spaces where people linger, interact, and celebrate community moments. This isn't just architecture, it's revitalization." For the first time, he spoke not just about function, but about emotion, invoking the very essence of what he aimed to accomplish. With each articulation, the doubt that once plagued him faded, replaced by conviction forged through growth and unwavering support. As the presentation drew to a conclusion, the air pulsed with newfound energy. Instead of feeling like a mere supplier of ideas, Tom emerged as a partner wielding foresight, backed by a team that believed in him. When the investors asked how they could support the vision, he felt the weight of possibility envelop him like warmth from the sun. The answers lay in collaboration, refining his designs to meet practical realities without sacrificing essence. He realized that he could lead while being led himself, directing the conversation with humility and courage. The following week brought the final votes, and the excitement coursed through him. There was the email in his inbox, approved. Overwhelmed with elation, Tom sank into his chair, astonishment mingling with rapid breaths. This was not just a milestone. This was the culmination of years, his own rebirth. As he reflected on the journey, he realized it wasn't simply about the designs that would soon rise from the ground, but also the metamorphosis within him. He had learned to conquer doubts, proving that success threaded through authentic connection and honest vulnerability. In that moment of triumph, nothing could overshadow his victory. Tom knew that he had fully embraced who he was and could now forge a path defined by ambition instead of fear. With every challenge ahead, he recognized that he had cultivated resilience, and that in itself was the foundation for every future success. It was time to step forward into the world with unwavering determination, ready to share not just his architectural vision, but the story of a man who overcame his own shadows. You need to subscribe now to witness the next chapter in incredible journeys of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Comment below your thoughts on Tom's remarkable evolution and what you think comes next. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need this dose of inspiration today.